Purposely. Your life, God's purpose. Listen at purposely.com.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Gospel Tech Podcast. My name is Nathan Sutherland, and this podcast is dedicated to helping families love God and use tech. Today, we are talking about how we can get the most out of these rainy days. If you were here in the Northwest, you know that winter, well, it's technically over, has really only just begun. We are finishing the cold snap, certainly, but this is the season of life when screens really take an uptick. We've started our new year. We are in the doldrums of the transition from winter to spring. Often the weather isn't good enough to just be like willingly going outside or doing tasks like yard work. So how do we make sure that we're getting the most out of our screens and make sure that we're also still building some of that resilience for real world play? This awkward season of rain and subpar weather is really a great chance for us to begin to build up some of that real world stamina as the spring and then the summer comes. And oftentimes, those are the times we go outside and enjoy it on purpose, but because it's easy. And that doesn't necessarily mean we're growing with that. It's just what we're doing because that's easy. So when it's rainy, the easy thing is often the screens. So how do we make the most of these rainy days? That's what we're going to talk about. We're actually going to talk about 5 ways to do that. And the first will be kind of our next week conversation. I guess this is a bonus point, is just make sure that we're looking at our priorities. I ask you to set 5 priorities with your family, 5 things that take empirical priority over everything else. Meaning if there's ever a butting up of 2 activities, we could see a friend or play a sport, we know which one of those we're committed to right now. There are absolutely families who say, you know what, this is our season of being available for friends. So we're not going to play that sport because that sport would draw us away. And there are some families who go, you know what, our friends are on that team, so we're making that sport a priority because that's where we want to be right now. And you know what, that means we're going to say no to some other people and some other opportunities. As long as you've talked it out, we're good. We'll talk more about that in the future. But for today, 5 things we can do to make the most of our tech and our screen time in this rainy season and to build up that resilience. As Jonathan Haidt says, the risk, responsibility, and risk, responsibility, and free play. I don't know where reward came from, but free play that helps our children both be psychologically healthy, that helps their brains develop, but also teaches them the proper boundaries that they need to keep tech in its proper place, which is the Andy Crouch TechWise family repeated admonition throughout that book of use tech, make sure it stays in its proper place. So you go to it and then it stays there and you walk away. Here we go. 5 things. First, let's just start with the plain and simple first one. You ain't made of sugar. So it is perfectly reasonable as a parent to send your child outside with a jacket on or with galoshes or with whatever it's going to take for them to be safe. Maybe it's not all the way outside. Maybe you set your garage aside. So that's one thing we did this last week. Is we went on OfferUp a couple months ago and we found, or Facebook Marketplace, and we found a very inexpensive foosball table. And we just rearranged over the Valentine's Day weekend, very romantically, moved our whole garage around so that we now have a space where we can have friends over and they're not going to freeze. They're not going to get wet. It won't get ruined. They're not exposed to, drafts and wind. But it's still outside. It's not a heated enclosed area. And foosball works great there because it's not so loud. If you have it just like in the middle of your house, it's hard to think sometimes, but that's an activity. Now, if you've ever played foosball, like 30 minutes of foosball is a pretty good round. Like don't expect your kids to go spend 6 hours playing foosball. Maybe we have a young man in our family who likes to build tournaments. So we've done 2 already. But that's not what I would expect normal. This is a way when your kids go, yeah, but we don't know what else to do. Foosball is a great transition activity towards the outdoors. Riding bikes, throwing balls, frisbees, other activities. These are things your kids can do to get themselves outside, even when it's raining. Now, maybe not in a torrential sideways downpour where they're going to be harmed themselves and others because no one can see them. But like it's March, all 3 now are going to be playing baseball. We're not what I would consider like a baseball family. I never really played. I think I played the last time when I was 12 and I wasn't good. I actually got skipped in the playoffs in the batting order because I was so bad the coach tried to cheat and just didn't have me go up because I was going to be a free out. So fun fact, actually full story. He ended up coming to know Jesus as an amazing human now. But at the time, that's how bad I was. So when I say we're not a baseball family, We're not a baseball family. But my kids are really into it. And Anna and I want to support that. So we get out the net and we get out the tee. And a lot of this equipment comes from people who had it and then put it on something like Facebook Marketplace or OfferUp because their kids grew out of it. And they don't want to throw it away. So they'll give it up for pennies on the dollars. And so you can get that kind of stuff. And again, these are small activities. We're not saying, how can you spend 12 hours a day outside? We're saying, how can we make sure tech stays in its proper corner? A little 30-minute activity to buffer against that, like a foosball or a bike ride or hitting off the tee into the net. 30 minutes is plenty of time. 30 minutes is plenty of time to warm up your arm, throw a couple pitches. I've got 2 wannabe pitchers in my family, and they're both looking strong. Warm up those tendons. You don't want to be coming out cold for tryouts and hurting something. This is something we can begin to do as we get into this and begin looking at, hey, this is going to come next. Why don't you go take 30 shots on the basketball hoop? Why don't you ride your bike for a couple minutes? Like these opportunities, because once you do it in little, maybe you just start with 10 minutes. And then it's, that wasn't that bad, or that was fun, or I want to have a friend over and do this activity. That's what we're looking for here. The second is an extension of this, and this is individual playtime. These rainy days are a perfect opportunity to build up that independent resilience. We're talking children as young as 2 and 3 need the chance to be playing away. I mean, younger than that too, but need the chance to play away from you. To, yes, play with you, make eye contact, and have you be fully present, and to have a spot where they can actually play independently without you in line of sight. Now, that doesn't mean put them in dangerous situations. Put them in a room that's managed. Put them in a corral if you're worried they're going to crawl and pull stuff off the counter. Like, there are ways to manage that, but it's still independent. They're still learning to self-soothe. And as they get older, you might even start with just 5 or 10 minutes of, you're going to be in your room for the next 10 minutes. With no screens. You're going to have books, you're going to have toys, you're going to have whatever it is that would be a fun analog adventure type play, and 10 minutes, and then you can come out. We're going to do that every day this week. And next week, we might try 12 or 15 minutes and then build that over the coming weeks. But that independent playtime is so important for personal development. And it is such a value to you to get that chance to realize your child's okay. You still love them, and they are learning how to transition themselves in free play. Such a valuable life lesson for both us and for our kids. Third then is getting some of those analog adventures in, and I've broken it into 4 categories: bake, play, draw, and build. Bake, play, draw, and build for baking. So I'm just going to run through these fairly quick, but there are free recipes. If you go to America's Test Kitchen, you can find them on there. There's different cookbooks that you can purchase. So we got like the kids baking book for Henry at Christmas, but you can also find free recipes. So you're not out anything. If you want more than that, Radish, 2 Ds, like rad dish, but also radish, is a subscription kids cooking. I was going to call it a program, but that's not the right word. But it's a cooking subscription where they send you the 3 parts of a meal, and it's themed by the month. And so they're like, this is what you could make for breakfast, and this is what you could make for lunch, this is what you could make for a dinner, and this would be your dessert. And it's very cool. It's not the cheapest thing in the world. Maybe go in on it with the family. If you want to like take turns who gets it first and you alternate every other month, like, okay. But the idea being, this is something that enables you to have a child who's taking initiative. So this is Henry. Owen doesn't really care, and Hadley can't really do it independently. But Henry is getting to the point where he can. Initially, we just said, well, set everything up, then we'll watch you add it. And then, okay, set everything up, we'll watch you add it, and we'll put it in the oven. And then go ahead and do everything except the oven. And like we're slowly building this, again, free play. It's his initiative and him making his mistakes. And that adds some risk and responsibility. You can get hurt baking, but it's minimal. Right? Like you might get a burn on your hand from the oven. We're not letting him boil any water right now. And when you use the big mixer, you got to have a parent in the room, but you can do stuff by hand without us there. Like those are cool. Baking is a really cool opportunity for a child to taste the sweetness, pun fully intended, of their growing and their independence. And frankly, an experience that is becoming more popular. Baking and cooking has entire channels and shows dedicated to it. So something that kids do find exciting. Play then is playing as a family. Playing board games, something I often recommend. We've recently gotten into Clue because of my kids. I'd never played it until like last month. Clue, but also Carcassonne is a cooperative puzzle game for like family night, if you have older kids, I really like the game Codenames. That's been a really fun one with like younger or older young adults or actual just adult groups, which is basically you get a single word hint and you're trying to get your teammates to guess just your cards, not your opponents, and not guessing the one card that'll make you lose the whole game. So those are some simple games, but those are things you can do in 15 to 30 minutes. We also, what was the one? We suggested Throw Burrito. There's another one. Oh, Sleeping Queens is an oldie but a goodie by Game Right Games. Game Right has a really cool series of games. They're not sponsors. I just like their stuff, and our kids consistently like what they create. So if you bake something and you play something and you draw something, this is Art Hub Kids on YouTube. Don't just send your kid onto the YouTubes. But if you want free content that's high quality, you can go on there and pull up a video, do it with them, or let them do it with a sibling. Make sure the laptop is somewhere where you're present so they don't get any negative ad influence. You can hear what's happening, but also that they don't get distracted by some suggested video, because YouTube is trying to keep them longer than they intended. They want to do what you said, but YouTube's not helping them. It's built on distraction. So that's a great resource. Or they actually have, it's Art Hub Kids Art Hub. I think it's Art Hub Kids. They have a book now where you can actually like get how to draw instructions in like the analog format. So you could check that as well. It's just on Amazon. But that's something we've enjoyed. There's markers. They are permanent markers. They're basically like Sharpies. They're alcohol markers, but they are inexpensive, $17. You get like 30 or 40 markers. They're high quality. They're dual tipped. So you get the fine and then the broad stroke options, and they look good. So I would encourage, we've done that for our kids. We make sure they always have like a piece of paneling or cardboard or something behind it, because it will go through. But that has been a really neat way, again, for them to do something on their own, build an interest, begin to recognize when they look at something. Like I've had Henry be like, look at the way that looks far away, or that person looks taller in this picture. And he's noticing now, because he's tried to do it and been like, wait, why doesn't it look like it looks in my head? Like, because there's a skill to that and I can't do it. Anna's far more the artist than me, but it is fun to watch kids as they like things click in their brains as they enjoy different parts of the same task. So that's another one. So we can bake, we can play, we can draw, and then we can build. And in building, these do cost money. So first, going all the way down to like a year and older is Magna-Tiles or something like it. I'll include a link in the show notes for an inexpensive off-brand of Magna-Tiles, but Magna-Tiles are like $1 a tile. You can find them on OfferUp. You can find them on Facebook. Buying them used is great because they don't, I think we spent 3 Christmases. So buying them for our kids, that's how we got our bin of them. And I think we've broken a total of 3 tiles in 8 years. So they last, if you buy the actual Magna-Tile brand, I can tell you're getting a product that works. It doesn't wear out. And our kids have been incredible. They love to build tires and just hurl things at them. And that's how the 3 broke, but only 3. And we've broken a lot of things in our household. So off-brand might work great. They're certainly more reasonably priced. But building with littles, and then they keep enjoying it. Magna-Tiles still make it into all the imaginative play our kids do. And the board games end up being used with Magna-Tiles as these like mashup worlds they make. And that's really cool, rainy day free play that will take 30 minutes that might have been dedicated to thoughtless screen time to deliberate analog play. And that's what we're looking for here. We're not looking for how can we never touch another screen. It's screens can be such an easy default because everyone's so close and so loud and we're so tired. And it's been so long here in the Northwest. Like it's been raining since October and we know that we still have 2 months left. So what can we do instead of just giving up? How can we keep being intentional with our time? Building Magna-Tiles, Legos. I'm going to come back to Legos with the family build, but they're a great option. Maybe you can find them used. Oftentimes, it's not much cheaper, but something to have out and build. And third is Crunch Labs. That's the Mark Rober. He's a YouTube personality, but he built a little science subscription group, kind of like the Radish, but for science. And when we first got him, it was a gift. And I was moderately enthused. I'm like, all right, if you can use a YouTube guy to get my kid interested in like science stuff, cool. And so we got 3, and it was actually awesome. The lessons, they were teaching on like the flywheel and conserved energy. And the lesson that went with it, I thought was a how-to of like, this is how you build this product. It wasn't. It was an 18-minute video on the science of what this means and the applications for it, and then how that applies to the thing you'll build on your own outside the video. And that made me just a huge fan of what was happening. If you can get my 11 and 9-year-old to sit for 18 minutes learning very real physics science lessons and then applying them in a specially designed toy that obviously isn't going to get a ton of use. Like at some point, you know how it works and the novelty wears off, but you have a very real application to draw on later when you learn about things like flywheels or the conservation of energy. I'm a big fan. Those are really cool building blocks, and it's well worth the cost, in my opinion, to do a couple times a year. And now we're at the point where we got a few, and then the kids are saving up. And we're like, we'll go halfsies with you, right? Like you can buy it and like we'll help cover some of that because we see the value in it. You don't have to do that, but these are options. These are 30-minute activities that you could do to inspire play and interest and curiosity. And they're very high quality in terms of the content being delivered and the lessons that are being delivered. So they're really cool. That's the Crunch Labs science boxes, crunch boxes. I don't know. But that's if you're going to build. So we have 3 then. We've played outside. We have individual play time, some free play, getting some analog adventures in baking, playing, drawing, and building, and then making a play date. So do the same stuff, but now invite a friend over. And there is always the option. This was not always an option for us because we lived further out than most of the people we knew. We had one family who lived near us, but now we have multiple families who go to our school that live in the area. So we don't just send our kids over because sometimes the tech at that house is way less controlled than the tech at your house. But we have organized play dates. This last weekend, we had the chance to play with cousins. And then we had friends who live close enough and they had their boys walk to us. So we just did 2 hours. Said, we're going to come over at 10:30. You can stay till 12:30 and we'll send you right back home. Those families and us, we've played together. We've driven our kids over. Like any good situation with friends, you generally start with something small. So we picked an hour where we knew we had a hard stop. We got sports at 2:00. You can go over at noon, right? I have to come pick you up at 1:15. Like, all right, so we pick you up, we go to sports, and then like, how was it? How did it go? We met the parents. We had to talk about our tech expectations. Hey, please don't let them watch TV and we're not playing video games right now. You have to say those words. The parents might go, yeah, that's us too. Or, oh, no worries. Like, we'll make sure we keep them outside. But that is a conversation you have to say. You don't have to say it in a way that makes it sound like you don't trust them or they're not doing a good job with their kids. You can just say, this is how we expect our children to act. And we want you to know that. Please call us if they do anything else. The expectation is you're building baby steps of risk and responsibility and free play. And you're joining up with others to do it. And in this case, so cool because that family ended up being right on the same page. They play at recess at school and then they can spend, it's going to be a couple days a month where these friends will come over. That's fantastic. That is something we want for our kids. And guess what? They played foosball. They actually ended up shooting targets in our backyard using little airsoft guns, which works where we live. It may not work where you live, but like they did that. And then they played out front and then came in and played some board games. And that was 2 hours and no sweat off our back and a really sweet playtime for our kids they were pumped about. So make it a play date, do the same stuff you're already doing, but invite someone to come with you or to go over them and bring the fun to them. And then 5 is do it as a family, whatever the activity is. So the 2 that I picked, because we already kind of went through the analog adventures, the 2 I picked that have been really sweet in this season, we have 11, 9, and 5, is read aloud. So reading something with the kids or having them read it to us. Sometimes it's a book where we actually have to read them independent. So Anna has done a really good job of this where she'll pick a book, the kids will read to her, but they'll do it independent. So it doesn't spoil the plot for the other kids who may not be old enough. So that gets like a sweet little mini date in. And sometimes we just read aloud. Hadley loves Calvin and Hobbes. Now, you know our stance with Roald Dahl books. We like Roald Dahl. We appreciate a little bit of the ironic and sarcastic humor, but Calvin and Hobbes fits in that. Really good observations about childhood and society, but some of it has some snark. And you may want to think through if that's something you want to talk to your children about, if it's something you want to introduce, or if it's just, you know what, this isn't how I want my kid to act and I don't approve. So I don't want to just blanket suggest Calvin and Hobbes because I have found not everyone has that sense of humor and appreciates it. And I respect that. And there are things you can read as a family with all three of you in the room, be that Frog and Toad or Winnie the Pooh or Redwall or whatever it might be. So two great resources for finding books to read together, Read Aloud Revival and Honey for a Child's Heart. Both those are available on Amazon, but both books give you really great suggestions by age level and by interest that you can just pick through. So with Hadley's in the room, we're generally not picking the 11 to 12-year-old books because that's beyond her even just in following the plot sometimes. But for the boys, independent reading books or books they can read to us, these are great options. Books they're really enjoying right now, I mentioned Calvin and Hobbes, but the National Park Mystery Series, both our boys have loved it. There's some friends, and it's flashing back to basically there was like a great-grandfather. There's like a treasure hunt happening through the national parks around the United States. And then it's the kids like 100 years later doing it, trying to follow the clues and figure out what's happening. And the boys have both been enthralled, kind of in the lane of Boxcar Children. If you like those books, or your kids like those books, they would probably love those. And then the Green Ember series is another one the kids, boys specifically. And then Peter Nimble has a little more Roald Dahl style snark to it. But Peter Nimble and Sophie Quire is a 2-book series that has been great. It's little getting towards teenager in terms of some of the way they talk to one another. They're not always perfectly respectful. It doesn't always celebrate that. Like they're just showing though that sometimes people are moody and they say mean things and the characters actually say that. And there's some violence involved that is violent. So just be aware of that. That is, we're letting Owen into those books, and we found that to be a nice, what would you say? It's a nice medium ground between adventure and safety. There is still very real risk and adventure happening, but it's not going to like scar his mind and heart. So reading together, reading them to you is our first activity we've really enjoyed. And then the second is listening to music. We've gotten into records. We like one album by one group playing sequentially, and the kids have really enjoyed that. And then third is puzzles, which I never took myself for a puzzler. I guess kind of like I never assumed I was a baseball family kind of person, but puzzles. The Buffalo Games make Star Wars puzzles that our kids love. 100 piece, 300 piece, we're up to 500 piece right now. We can't do any bigger than 5. We just get lost. But 500 piece, we have a little itty bitty table that just stays out, and we let puzzles take over and then do it. Henry is our main puzzler. Owen enjoys them. Hadley just likes to move pieces around. But it is fun to go and like do a couple pieces and like come back to it later and not have to sit and like knock out a puzzle all at once. And again, it's that little bit of a like, oh, I just read a book and I'm not quite ready to go play outside. What do? Spend 10 minutes on the puzzle. And we think of it as like a family project. So we're like, hey, help us with the puzzle. And Ann and I actually need help. Like we're not just like, oh, we're letting the kids participate. Like they mostly drive this. We do a couple. I'm by far the worst. Hadley's better than me. But it is fun. So puzzles are super cool. The Diamond Art is another one. I actually will include the link because you need to buy them on sale. They're about $20 and it's, what are they? Like 1.5 feet by 2 feet is kind of the $20 size. But they're those itty bitty little gems you pick up with like the tip of a pen. They give you a special little stylus and you put them on in color. And it's kind of a color by numbers, and it's very satisfying, and it requires focus, and you're not going to get overstimulated doing it. And it's something you can leave out. These are all things that like once they're done, you don't generally frame them. Like it's done. That was a really good experience. It was well worth $20. You got more time out of that than watching a movie. So in terms of investment, you're going to get your enjoyment time out of it. If you choose to frame it, that's super cool. But the kind of the process is the point. And I add Legos to this. And with Legos, I have crossed the bridge on Legos. I love Legos. I think they're very cool. I strongly recommend them, and they're wildly expensive. So either buy yourself a used set or buy a new one and flip it. Build it, break it back down, put it in a bag, and sell that thing. And you'll recoup at least half your cost. And that's if you're just trying to move them quick. So you buy a $60 set, you're going to be able to buy that for $30, sell that for $30 in a month. Keep the original box, keep the instructions, just dump everything into a gallon bag and make sure it's all there. So like keep the spare parts on a cookie sheet when you're building it. But like that is what we're going to be doing because we have a few, like you can see behind me, I have some big old Legos up there. Some of like the custom creative sets. So I have the tree house and there's a Star Wars spaceship. But what we've actually found is the most fun is building something. So take like the Christmas house. Around Christmas time, they come out with some kind of gingerbread house and you buy the set, you set it up like a puzzle. Bag comes out, you flip the pages. You say, everyone, you can do 2 pages. You can do the left and the right, flip it over, and then you have to walk away. You can't finish 30 pages all at once. But if you haven't done it in a while, you go and you do 2 pages and you get to see it build and you leave, for school or whatever, and you come back and mom and dad have each done 2 pages and now it's your turn. And it does build this really cool rhythm, but it works year round because there's cool sets all year round. It's not the cheapest. Legos are so expensive, but like you'll pay $120 for just like an average, 12 plus set. But if you're getting $60 back, that's a much more reasonable investment. And you would just have to make the choice if that's worth your time and money. But it is something you can do together, something to be fun for everyone without everyone being super over the moon about it, without it becoming a massive sink of space and resources. So those are my 5 suggestions for you. Let's run back through them. When we are talking, how do we make the most of these rainy days? How do we build that resilience and that ability to find something fun to do and have an analog adventure, but when maybe the weather doesn't always encourage it, we can absolutely get outside in it. That's first and foremost. You're not made of sugar. You won't melt. But you can do individual playtime inside, analog adventures, which include baking, playing, drawing, and building. Make it a play date. Invite a friend to join you on that. And then make it family time with reading, certainly. And there's great ways to do that, but also with a family activity that's a shared activity. And in this case, I used puzzling as that. I guess it technically falls under building, but I was going with like the more artistic side of it. So building Legos is like the real world Minecraft piece. You're not going to get overstimulated with Legos. And then the cooperative aspect that Legos could be one of those. Maybe it's something more like a puzzle or a gem art thing, but those are all options. My hope for you in doing this is remembering that we're not trying to avoid all screens. We're not trying to make it so our kid can never watch a show or listen to music or have a family movie night or play a video game, but instead that we're doing our tech time. We're enjoying that and seeing it grow our children and cool things come out of that. And we're watching their reset improve rather than collapse. The reset being their relationships and their responsibilities, their emotions, their sleep, their enjoyment, their time. We're seeing them grow in those areas. And then we're going on to the rest of life. We're going to go do 15 minutes of puzzle or 15 minutes of throwing the ball around outside or 15 minutes of foosball or 15 minutes of independent play. And we're making sure that we still remember how to operate and feel joy at the pace of real life. So that is our conversation for today. If that was helpful for you, would you share it with someone else? Tell them about these resources, share with them what your experience is, and would you have a conversation with your family today about what kinds of analog adventures are we doing purposely during these rainy days, and what are we looking forward to when the weather improves? Because that'll give us some avenues. I didn't even mention things like going on rainy day hikes. Like those are options. You can go fishing when it's raining. This won't hamper your experience at all. So if your kids are excited for certain things come the spring, like my kids with baseball, maybe that will help you direct some of those activities. And third and finally, would you think about joining us in the future part of this conversation as we continue this conversation about how we can love God and use tech? And then third and finally, if this resource was helpful for you, would you join us next week as we continue this conversation about how we can love God and use tech?